Imagine walking alone through the Brazilian backlands after night has completely taken over the landscape. The intense heat of the day gives way to a dry wind that moves through the twisted branches of the Caatinga. There are no streetlights, no nearby houses, only the glow of the moon and the stars lighting a path surrounded by rocks, thorny shrubs, and rugged trees. The silence is so deep that even the smallest sound seems far louder than it really is. Then, suddenly, you hear a whistle. Short, distant, so similar to a human whistle that you stop for a few seconds. You look to one side, then the other, but no one is there. The silence returns. You keep walking. Moments later, you hear the same whistle again, except now it seems much closer. Your heart begins to race, your breathing changes, and an unavoidable question crosses your mind. Is someone out there, or is it just your imagination? This is one of the best-known stories from the Brazilian backlands. In many communities across northeastern Brazil, there is a piece of advice that has been passed down for generations. If you hear a whistle at night in the Caatinga, do not answer it. Keep walking and don't try to find where the sound came from. But why have so many people repeated this exact warning for so long? Did this story originate from a real event? Is it simply an old legend, or is there something behind these accounts that we still can't fully explain? To understand this mystery, we first need to get to know the setting where it takes place. The Caatinga is one of the world's most unique ecosystems and exists only in Brazil. During the day, it appears dry and quiet, yet it is full of life. Birds, small mammals, reptiles, insects, and plants have all adapted to its harsh climate. But when the sun goes down, everything changes. The temperature drops, nocturnal animals emerge, and the sounds become completely different. The wind whistles through dry branches. Trees crack. Dead leaves scrape across the ground. Sometimes the atmosphere becomes so strange that even people who know the region well admit feeling uneasy. It was in this environment that countless stories were born, told by cattle herders, farmers, and travelers. For decades, people who had to cross long distances on foot or horseback described remarkably similar experiences. They claimed to hear a whistle coming from somewhere in the vegetation. Believing it to be another traveler, they answered the call. The problem was that no one ever appeared. A few minutes later, the whistle would return, sounding even closer than before. Some insisted that the sound seemed to follow them wherever they went. Others said they wandered for hours without being able to find their way home, even though they had known the area since childhood. It's important to point out that there is no concrete evidence suggesting anything supernatural was involved in these stories. Even so, the accounts have survived for generations with surprisingly little change. That raises an interesting question. Why do people from different places tell such similar stories? One possible answer lies in the reality of life in the backlands many years ago. Before electricity and modern roads reached the region, traveling at night was extremely dangerous. It only took one wrong step off the trail to encounter sharp rocks, thorny plants, venomous animals, or hidden holes concealed by the vegetation. On top of that, the lack of visual landmarks often caused people to lose all sense of direction, walking in circles without realizing it was far more common than most people imagine. Because of this, many researchers believe the legend of the mysterious whistle was actually a clever way of passing down practical knowledge. Instead of simply saying, "Don't travel at night," or "Stay on the trail," the elders created a story that inspired caution and respect. If people believed that answering a mysterious whistle could bring terrible consequences, they would naturally be much more careful when walking alone after dark. In this way, a suspenseful tale became an effective lesson in survival. But are there scientific explanations for these strange sounds? In fact, there are several possibilities. Wind can produce surprising effects when it passes through certain rock formations or moves between dry trees. Depending on its direction and intensity, the sound can genuinely resemble a human whistle. In addition, several species of nocturnal birds produce calls that are unfamiliar to most people. Owls, nightjars, and other nighttime birds can make sounds very different from the ones we hear during the day. Some small mammals also produce high-pitched noises capable of confusing anyone walking alone in the darkness. Another important factor is the way the human mind works. When we find ourselves in a dark, silent, and unfamiliar environment, our brains automatically enter a heightened state of alert. This response exists because our ancestors depended on it for survival. In that condition, every sound becomes more significant. A simple crack may seem like footsteps. A branch moving in the wind may feel like someone is watching from the shadows. The brain tries to identify patterns as quickly as possible, and sometimes it transforms ordinary sounds into something much more meaningful. Even knowing all these possible explanations, many people who live in the Brazilian backlands still respect the old tradition. Not necessarily because they believe in anything supernatural, but because they understand that caution is never a bad idea. If you're alone, surrounded by darkness, and hear an unfamiliar sound, the safest choice is still to stay calm, remain on the trail, and avoid following noises whose source is unknown. Perhaps that's exactly why this story has survived until today. It doesn't rely on ghosts or mysterious creatures. Instead, it speaks to one of humanity's oldest emotions, the fear of the unknown. It reminds us how our ancestors protected one another through stories passed from generation to generation. And it shows that, even in an age of advanced technology, there are still places where nature can make us feel small, alert, and deeply respectful. So, the next time someone tells you about the mysterious whistle of the Caatinga, perhaps the most interesting question isn't whether the story is true or false. Maybe the real question is why so many people, across different generations and different places, all decided that the safest choice was never to answer when they heard that sound. What about you? Have you ever heard a similar story from your parents, grandparents, or people who grew up in the countryside? Was it just another legend, or was there a real event hidden behind the tale? Share your thoughts and tell us about other stories from the Brazilian backlands. Who knows? The next investigation might begin with a story sent by you.